Hey guys, welcome back to How to Roll Dice. I'm Josh, and for today's daily dive, I sort of wanted to jump into a topic that I touched on in yesterday's, but I really want to elaborate on because I feel like it deserves to have a spotlight shown on it. If you are into board games, and especially if you are getting into board games, I find it's very easy to slip into the completionist or the collector's mindset, where you're picking up games or expansions or promotions for a game purely because you're sort of enthralled with the idea of owning all of that game. You like the core game, or maybe you think you like the core game and you really haven't even given it much of a chance yet. Maybe you've only played it once or twice, but you've made up your mind, I love this game, I want to have as much of it as possible. And so you go out and you find every single expansion or promo or little side quest or bolt on to the game, and you just, you throw all your money at it. This is a very easy mistake to fall into because, one, I feel personally you need to play a game between 6 and 12 times, usually with varying groups of people, to decide if you even really like it. Playing it once or twice, you don't really get enough experience with the game and the different sort of outcomes and scenarios that it has to offer, assuming it's a relatively complex game and not something extremely simple like checkers. And even then, there's a lot that can happen. But you need to give it some time. And a lot of times you can leap to this conclusion of, I love this game, I must have more, way too early. I've done this myself quite a bit, and I have this sort of default mindset of being a collector. There's quite a few examples around my office here that you can't see right now, but for example, I own, probably $400 or $500 worth of Star Wars Armada from Fantasy Flight Miniatures or Fantasy Flight Games. I think I've played that game twice, ever, but I loved the idea of the game. And so I went out and I bought everything. Now that's kind of an interesting example because those miniatures are very large scale, they're pre-painted, they're very nice looking. You could easily put them all out on a shelf on display, as I have, and it almost looks like you collected a bunch of collectibles, like Funko Pops, right? That's not so bad, right? Because at least you've got something at the end of the day. But when we're talking about a straight up board game, right? And I'm gonna give you an example in a minute, a really good example of a time I've done this and it was terrible. You're basically collecting a bunch of cardboard that sits in a box that has some graphics on it, but for the most part, it's kind of gonna be tucked away. You're gonna stick it on a shelf in the background and $200, $300, $500 is just sitting there, collecting dust, right? You don't want to do that. This isn't a hobby like collecting comics, for example, right? Where if you want to pick up brand new runs and you want, every single issue of some new run of Spider-Man that comes out, it's $3 to $5 per issue for as long as the run goes. And maybe if you get 100 issues out of that, sure, you'll hit $500, but then you've got that many issues, 5 or 100 issues of that run, right? And hopefully you really liked the whole thing and those actually have some collector's value, I would guess, right? If you're buying a special edition, maybe it's 10, 15, 20 bucks. I'm not talking about like first appearance of Wolverine or anything like that, but your typical special edition comics, your holiday, your limited edition covers, your artist covers, things like that. So that's a cheaper, more sort of like affordable collector type thing. Board games does not fit into that same vein. Most boxes start around $20 to $30 and they very quickly ramp up to $60, $80, $100, $200 for some of the larger, rarer, more expansive titles. And that's without expansions or promotions or add-ons of any kind. And that's also ruling out that maybe you want to have a better way to organize the tokens for that game, or maybe you want to have a better dice tower for that game, or maybe you'd like to buy some upgraded tokens for that game rather than the cardboard ones, you want some nice resin ones. All of that costs money, and if you're going to put that effort and that money and that time into collecting a game, you really, really, really should love it. Here's an example of a time when I did this, in the worst way, right? I went out and bought a copy of this game. Time Stories, okay? Time Stories comes in this like elusive looking box. You're curious, like, oh, it's got this super sort of like minimalist box. It just says Time Stories. What's it all about? You crack the game open, you take a look at it. Really interesting concept. You and the other players are working cooperatively to try to travel back and forward through various timelines across multiple universes to try to stop this sort of like evil force. I'm not sure if we ever figured out if it was one guy or a group or something greater that's causing these epoch events to ripple through time and change the timelines in a way that they should not have. It's very Doctor Strangey, sort of. And the game has a really cool like design to it too, the way that all of the cards lay out to give you a visual representation of the space that you're in. If you're in a hospital OR ward, then you actually see the hospital OR ward and you see there's a nurse over there and a patient over there and you can move your pawns to go talk to them. It's really cool. And the story of the game is really cool. All of the missions have really fun concepts. They're a little, a little basic at the beginning, but then they get really complex from there, and they scale a lot of genres. You've got, 1940s noir, you've got deep space sci-fi, you've got medieval fantasy, literally, like dragons and magic, because you're traveling across multiple worlds and timelines. So there can be anything going on, pirates, Egyptians, whatever you want. There's some Cthulhu, or some Lovecraft in there, I should say. It's got a lot to offer. However, the game quickly derails as soon as you realize how its mechanics work. You have to play the same story over and over and over and over to beat it. And the story doesn't change until you reach the next step. So you're replaying steps A, B, C, D, E 5 or 10 times before you finally get to F. And then you'd fail F, and then you have to play A, B, C, D, E, F, and then you finally get to G, and then you make the wrong decision at G, and then you have to go, okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and every time it's like 20 minutes to reset the game, and then a half an hour to work your way back through all those steps, and you're skipping things because you don't want to do them again. It falls apart really fast. Now, before I realized all of that, and I had only played the game once or twice, I was like, this is such an amazing, unique game, I want to own all of it. I went out and I bought all of the expansions available for the game. Now, the base game is $50. The expansions are $25 each, and there are currently 2, 4, 6, 7 of them sitting on my shelf, and I believe there's 2 or 3 more out there that I haven't bought. So the $50 original, and then the 7 expansions that I bought, just to do some quick math, I've spent about $250 on this game that I hate. I've played through maybe 3 of those expansion boxes, really do not like the direction the game goes as far as how repetitive it gets and how complex and confusing the storyline gets to follow. Now, maybe this is just me, or I should say my friend group, because nobody that I've played it with really likes it. And I've looked at reviews online, and there's a lot of people that have this same issue with the game. The concept of having to replay a story over and over and over and over just gets exhausting, and it makes it unfun, and games should be fun, right? So here's an example of a time where I lost the plot, and I went out and bought all of these expansions for a game that I ended up hating, and now it just sits on a shelf and collects dust. And I've done this numerous times. Like I said, I did it with Armada, but again, at least there's some presentation value to the models. I've done it with a couple of different miniatures games, but again, once you build them and paint them, they kind of have a display value to them. There's a game over here, Ashes, Rise of the Phoenix Born, or over here, we've got the new Legend of the Five Rings from Fantasy Flight. Bought into those pretty heavily, thought I really liked the games, bought a ton of expansion decks, haven't played them since. So you have to be smart when you're buying games. Make sure you really do love a game if you're going to invest a ton of money into expansions or add-ons or promotions, especially if they're hard to find and expensive to collect. And yeah, just, give a game a good amount of time before you decide to say it's your favorite and throw everything at it, and try not to slip into that collector's or completionist mindset. But other than that, enjoy shopping and find some good games while you're out there. I hope you guys are having a good day, and I will see you tomorrow, probably with another one of these, possibly with a review or a documentary, depending on how much time I have tonight. Busy day at work today, but we'll see. Other than that, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.